Sometimes things happen that we can't quite put our finger on. We don't really know why they happened or how they happened. It's sort of outside of the realm of, our understanding. And, it's hard for us to compartmentalize what transpired, but, we always find a way. And, if you try hard enough, there's an old saying that goes, if you can't explain something, don't try, because you're gonna end up hurting yourself thinking too hard about that one, and you don't want to do that because that's gonna mess you up in the long run. So if you could just reach into your pocket for me and oh, what's that in your hand? What you got there in your hand? You just pull out your pocket. What's that? Oh, that's 2 tickets. 2 tickets to the Bonkers Theater. It was an average night for most people in the world, but for Molly Marshall, it was a very important night. This night was her first night as a college student. She was so excited and was getting all of her stuff set up in her room. She was in a very nice studio apartment-style dorm room. It had a common living room area, a kitchen, a bathroom, and 2 rooms for her and her roommate, who she looked forward to meeting. Molly began setting up things in her room and in her bathroom. After she finished putting everything in its appropriate place, she lied down in bed to get a good night's rest. It was about 2 in the morning when Molly awoke to a noise. It was a strange, thumping noise, and it sounded like something heavy was being dragged across the floor. Molly assumed this must have been her roommate. She must have traveled a long way to get here, Molly thought to herself, since her arrival was at this hour of the night. The noises went on for about 15 minutes, then it was dead silence in the dorm room. Molly was kind of annoyed by how long the noises went on, but thankfully it was a Saturday morning, and classes didn't begin until Monday morning. So she could sleep in for a while and it would be no issue. Molly went back to bed with plans to greet her brand new roommate tomorrow afternoon. Molly awoke at around 10 a.m. and stretched her arms above her head and let out a big relieved yawn before smacking her lips a couple of times and scratching her back. She then jumped out of her bed and into her bunny slippers, left her room to shamble her way over to the sink. There, she brushed her teeth and brushed her hair. She glanced over at her roommate's door, which was firmly shut. She must still be sleeping. She's probably all tuckered out by moving around whatever that was last night, Molly thought. Molly then returned to her room and got dressed. She decided the best thing to do today was take a walk around the campus to familiarize herself with where all of her classes would be. She also wanted to stop at the library and take a look around. She had heard about how great the library was on campus during her orientation. It had about every book you could think of. Everything from historical books from the 1400s to graphic novels of today. She assumed that she would be spending quite some time in a place like that. Molly made her way around the campus and walked by all the buildings in which she would be taking her classes. She was planning out her routes for how she would get to class each day. Since it was her first semester, she had to take core subjects like writing, mathematics, public speaking, and general sciences. All of these were located in different buildings except for writing and public speaking. On Monday, she would have writing and mathematics, so she planned her course between the 2 classes and saw how long it would take to get to them from her dorm between the 2. Classes would be separated by 2 hours, so she decided she could spend that time in the library doing some studying and maybe having a bagel or donut or something. Everything seemed like it was going to work out swimmingly. When she finished looking around, she decided to go to the library. Molly walked into the library and scanned her student ID at the turnstile. She passed through the turnstile and made her way into the large, sprawling first floor of the library. This floor didn't resemble a library at all. There were no bookshelves or books, just desks with computers and printers and study areas. There were even conference rooms with glass walls so you could see what is being discussed but couldn't hear. Inside one of the conference rooms, Molly could see students discussing some sort of mathematics problem that they were scribbling out on a whiteboard. It was very fascinating. Molly then made her way through the study areas and found an area with stairs and a couple elevators. There was a weird, disheveled man leaned up against the wall next to the elevator buttons. To avoid talking to him, Molly opted to take the stairs. In the stairwell, Molly found the floor directory for the building. It seemed that the library had 6 floors and a basement, making for 7 floors total. Each floor didn't have any label for what it was used for, although it was color-coded by a Roy G. Biv color code in descending order, making the 7th floor red and the basement violet. Molly had noticed, now, that the first floor had been adorned by subtle uses of indigo, lining the walls and even the stairs in the stairwell before her eyes. Molly began ascending the stairwell until the stairs shifted from indigo to blue. On the blue floor, Molly found all kinds of books about various sciences, including science fiction. This was amazing to her. She glanced around for a while but wasn't particularly interested in the sciences, nor the respective works of fiction. She then ascended to the green floor, where she found all types of books on various forms of art. This included graphic novels and tutorial books on various art forms, as well as classics and literature. This floor was far more interesting, and Molly could see herself spending lots of time on this floor. She then proceeded upward to the yellow floor, which contained historical fiction and non-fiction, as well as religious texts and theology books. This was quite interesting to Molly as well, and she wouldn't mind reading more about different cultures from around the world. Next, Molly found herself on the orange floor. This floor was strange, because it was far more specific than the other floors. This floor was entirely dedicated to macabre and horror literature, and literature related to such subjects. Molly was never a fan of horror, and never liked monster movies. She always thought the monsters were really stinky and gross and unappealing. She left this floor as soon as she could. She finally made it to the top and final red floor. This floor was entirely dedicated to mathematics books, and was really boring and dull. Molly assumed she could maybe study up on the red floor since nobody would want to be around such boring and stupid books. On her way back down, Molly suddenly remembered the basement of the library. Molly curiously made her way to the violet basement, where she was greeted by 2 large wooden doors with frosted glass windows. She tugged on the doors, but they seemed to be locked. She pushed on them to see if that worked, but still nothing happened. She pressed up against the frosted glass to peer in with her hands cupped around her eyes, but it was no use. She couldn't make anything out. Disappointed, Molly decided to call it a day and retire back to her dorm room for the night. Perhaps she could pick up a sandwich on the way back, have a nice meal, and watch TV before bed. Molly walked into her dorm with a sandwich in hand and noticed that her roommate's door was ajar. Molly suddenly was excited and went to greet her roommate. She didn't want to make a bad first impression, so she lightly knocked on the frame of the door and called out her new roommate. There was a quiet and echoey sound that came from the room, then a slow scraping noise. Suddenly, a green fog began billowing out from underneath the door. Molly put her sandwich bag up to her face because the room was filled with the smell of sulfur. A loud moan was heard from inside the room. Molly pushed open the door to the room, worried that her roommate was in trouble. Inside, she was shocked to find a large antique sarcophagus, set upright, and coming out of it, a woman with a small frame, wrapped in bandages, missing patches of hair and a few of her teeth. Molly dropped her sandwich to the floor and ran away screaming. "I can't live with a mummy," Molly pleaded to her RA. "Molly, I understand that this is your first time being away from home, and you might not be accustomed to being around people from different backgrounds, but this is what college is about. It's about setting aside your differences to pursue higher learning and to become more educated about the world," the RA coldly replied. "But she is a stinky mummy and lives in a sarcophagus. If you can even call that living," Molly murmured. "You keep using that word mummy. She has a name, you know. It's Stacy, and she is actually pursuing a STEM degree in biological engineering. She earned her way into this college just like everyone else," the RA added before continuing. "I think you should go talk to admissions and make the case for why you should be allowed to stay at this school." Molly was shocked. "Stay at this school? What do you mean?" she asked. "Well, I don't think they knew you would be treating students from other backgrounds the way you've done with your roommate. Stacy has been crying for hours now. She really wanted to make a good first impression with you, but you went and messed everything up," the RA told her with a disappointed demeanor. Molly was horrified that she might be expelled before her very first semester at college had even begun. She sat in the admissions lobby, clutching the sides of her chair. Her heart was beating out of her chest, and her mind was racing. She felt like throwing up, but she didn't have anything to throw up because she had dropped her sandwich. In that moment, the door swung open. A little man in a green tie walked out. "Miss Marshall?" the man called out. Molly stood up and nodded her head. "Please step into my office," he said as he made his way around the door to hold it open for her. Molly sat in the office and the man made his way in, shutting the door behind him, till he found himself sitting behind the desk with his arms crossed. "Now, Miss Marshall, can you tell me why you're here?" Molly perked up. "I guess this has something to do with the mummy," she began before being cut off by an audible exhale from the man. "You mean Stacy," he corrected her. "Yeah, Stacy," Molly continued. "You see, she gave me quite a fright. I wasn't expecting to see a shambling mummy in my dorm room." The man leaned back in his chair, visibly upset. "Miss Marshall, you keep using that insensitive term to refer to your roommate. From now on, just refer to her as Stacy, she, or her." Molly gritted her teeth, seeing that she was unable to explain her feelings on the situation. "Can't I just get a new roommate?" "No, you can't," the man responded. "Not without a good reason. And not liking your roommate is not a good reason." Molly was unsure about her situation. "So what am I to do?" she asked. "You'll have to deal with your roommate's differences and get used to it. I suggest you start by apologizing. Stacy has a big heart, and I'm sure she will forgive you," the man replied. Molly returned to her dorm room and saw now that Stacy's door was shut, but she could hear crying coming from inside. The crying was hushed and reverberating around a bit. Molly figured Stacy must have been inside of her sarcophagus. Molly thought that maybe she should just go to her own room and hope that she could somehow avoid her roommate for the first semester and then move into a different dorm room next semester. But Molly didn't want to deal with the anxiety that would come with all of that waiting. She decided it would be best to get it over with now. Molly knocked on the door and called out, "Stacy, can we talk?" The crying stopped, and Molly could hear the sarcophagus slowly opening. She then heard the light footsteps approaching the door, before the door finally creaked open. There stood Stacy, with tears rolling out from what was left of her eyes, and down into the crevices of her hollow cheeks. "I wanted to say I'm sorry. You see, I just have never met him, Molly stopped herself. This is all new to me," she continued. "I just want to know if you're willing to forgive me for how I acted initially." Stacy stepped out of her room and wrapped her bony arms around Molly, squeezing her tight. "I forgive you, Molly," she said. The two decided to go to Texas Roadhouse for dinner as a special treat. Molly ordered a steak, medium, with mashed potatoes and gravy and fried okra on the side, and a sweet tea to drink. On the other hand, Stacy ordered the pulled pork and a sweet potato with honey cinnamon butter on the side, and a Coca-Cola to drink. Stacy would eat one dinner roll after another and keep asking for more and more. While waiting for more rolls, she would crack open peanuts and eat them, throwing the shells on the ground beneath her feet. Molly didn't eat nearly as many rolls or peanuts as Stacy did, but enjoyed herself nonetheless. The two exchanged some small talk, and both learned a few things about each other. They really didn't have much in common, but they enjoyed each other's company. The food finally arrived at the table, and Molly bowed her head for a prayer only to look up when she had finished to see Stacy mixing in her pulled pork into her sweet potato, making a sort of mush. She grabbed more cinnamon butter and added it to the mixture, stirring it till it had the consistency of baby food. She then took what was left of the unmixed pulled pork and sandwiched it between the dinner rolls and added the cinnamon butter inside. It was quite disgusting, but somewhat admirable at the same time. Some would say she was playing with her food, but she was really just maximizing her enjoyment in the way that she was eating it. Molly didn't want to make any remarks and just let her be. The two were mostly quiet as they ate, but slowly began to talk a bit throughout the meal. They started to get along and actually had a really good chemistry together. Turns out, they would maybe become great friends. They ate and talked until there was nothing left on their plates. Molly normally didn't eat as much as she did that night, but it seemed like Stacy normally eats like that every night, if not more. The two girls were stuffed and they rubbed their bellies with satisfaction as they made their way back to their dorm room. They said goodnight to each other and went to bed excited to start their first semester of college.